Hello, friends. Greg Kokel here on Stand to Reason. And, now I'm thinking about the timing. It was about 5 years ago, in 2019, when I actually took 4 different international trips. I think it was on 4 different continents. But one of those was the continent of Africa. Now, I'd been to Africa before. In Egypt, which is way up north, but never in the heart of Africa. I had an opportunity that year to go to Uganda. It was a fabulous experience for me there. But one of my hosts, someone I spent a lot of time with for the 8-10 days that I was there, is Ben Clifton. And Ben's my guest today, and he's got some news he wants to share with you. Ben, it's great to have you on board today.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be here with you.
Well, you were so kind to me on this trip to Uganda. I mean, it kind of came out of nowhere a little bit for me. We didn't know each other before. I had another obligation there, where in Kampala or wherever it was that I was doing most of the work, and you took me and drove me like 10 hours across the country to do some work at a university where you were involved in some magnificent work, and we'll be talking about that a little bit. And then on our way back, you treated me to a wonderful safari where we drove through this preserve, and it was magnificent. So I just want to start out by saying thank you so much for your great kindness to me while I was there in Africa. You were a great host.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Greg. And that was a fun time. And I'm so excited to be able to connect back in this way and share what's happened since our time in Ishaka, Uganda.
Yeah, that's right. You had... I know that since then we spent some time online because were putting together a new project, and you wanted me to talk with some of the financial partners that you had in line for that project, and which I was very happy to endorse what you're doing because I saw the tremendous work you were doing there while I was with you and was able to participate in that. I think the last time you and I actually were face to face was like a Seattle reality a year or two ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I have to share, right before I came into the conference, I was out in the parking lot in my car with my laptop and my hotspot, and I was being the instructor of a class with students from all over the world, mostly Africa, but that's the kind of world that has unfolded here since we were in Ishaka. So love to share more about that.
Yeah, sure. So this is the Apologetics on Mission, I think, is the enterprise. And I think it was maybe in formative stages when we were together. And your heart then obviously was to bring apologetics to these developing world communities, which we did on that particular long day when we drove all the way across Uganda, almost to the border of the next Western country, whatever that was. But
DRC, yeah.
Yeah, and I got a chance to teach and speak in a very primitive kind of circumstance, but I was so impressed by 2 things. I was impressed by the leadership you provided in kind of plowing new ground in that area, because that kind of work cross-culturally like that in a developing country, that's not easy to do. And I've been in enough countries just to know the challenges there. But also, and this is probably what motivated you after the teaching that I did there for you in these different locations, we had a meeting with a lot of the leadership, the student leadership from the university there, and they were just so committed and on fire. And they really wanted what you were able to bring. And I think what you've done since then, of course, are the next steps of which what you just described. Doing your teaching from inside your car to hotspot on a phone, while you're waiting for reality to start in Seattle is a part of that. So why don't you just pick it up from there, maybe where we left off together and how Apologetics on Mission has unfolded. Now, just before you get started, I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One reason is I want my listeners to see what pretty much one individual with a heart and a desire has been able to put together to make a difference in an area what I would I would call third column enterprise. Boots on the ground, you doing your job, getting this done, and making a difference. And plus, I'd also like them to consider being a part of what you're doing. And so maybe you can talk about both of those things. But I think the story of Apologetics on Mission and the productivity of it, and it's coming like not from a big organization, but one person with a vision and a heart. That's Mr. Ben Clifton. So go ahead, Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, well, thankfully, I'm more than one person now. But it did start out really fairly small. It actually predated our time together by 2 years. So my first trip to Uganda was in 2017. And that's really where the Lord planted the vision of what has become Apologetics on Mission, really giving me an insight to say, hey, my brothers and sisters here, for me, is in the middle of nowhere. They need apologetics just as much as the people here in my community in the Pacific Northwest do. And whereas we in the West are so privileged by so many resources, so many ministries, so many great teachers and programs, there's very little awareness of apologetics in certain parts of the world. There's very few resources, very few ministries. So that began a journey that thankfully we were able to connect. And as you described, that group of leaders that got together, I still have that picture of us. And I can tell you that at least half of those young men and women there have gone on. They are now operating what's called Apologetics Uganda, which is a standalone ministry in Uganda. Apologetics on Mission has trained them, has mentored them, and in fact, I'm going back at the beginning of September to spend a week with them again, and that's the fruit of what has transpired since then. So, really what our ministry is all about is raising Christian defenders globally, and the Lord has privileged us to be able to He's opened up certain regions in the world that He's called us to, and so we typically we build relationships because everything is based on relationship. We listen. We host what we call leaders summits, where we bring together people like you experienced. We brought those young people together. They got to hear a lot from you. We got to listen, and from that. Invariably, what comes out of those leaders' meetings is, number one, great enthusiasm for the project of apologetics. Some of these leaders may have only encountered the word apologetics right then and there, but once they catch the deeper meaning behind it, giving answers and defending the faith, they're on board. And what invariably is the first need is basic training. It's like they don't have any training. So it's become kind of a core of our ministry program is we offer a very accessible informal certificate program that's a 16-class course that gives them the foundational basics of apologetics. We call it the Introduction to International Apologetics, and we call it that because we want them to be able to have we want them who are usually living outside the West, with this being kind of their first exposure to serious apologetics. We want them to plug into the global community, to plug into the resources we have, and have a working fluency with the type of topics that are covered.
I have a question about this, Ben. I mean, so you talked about the course teaching the basics in apologetics. How is there foundational theology about Christianity? And the reason I ask that is a lot of these countries, I'm thinking specifically of Uganda,
Yes.
it is rife with cultic activity,
Yes.
word faith teaching. I mean, the kind of self-appointed prophets that are raking in the dough are up and down,
Yes.
Uganda
Yes.
and other countries as well. It's just a huge problem. And then you've got Jehovah's Witnesses, you got Mormons, you got not just the word faith, but you got, and it's clear a lot of people are being taken in because they just don't have basic theological foundation. So is that part of your training of
Yes.
these?
Absolutely, yes. So we dedicate a whole class on. We give 10 essential doctrines of the Christian faith, and we go through all of those. What you're bringing up is so true and tragic in a way. Now, we obviously we are vetting the people, the leaders that we connect with. We're making sure that they're starting off on a good foot. We're reinforcing that with some of the training that we provide in the course. And then in just the process of teaching apologetics, you naturally encounter some of these challenging doctrines. And so we have a course dealing with cults, and so we hit those kind of concerning efforts along the way.
So why did you choose Uganda? Is that kind of like your jumping off point for other countries? You mentioned your videos are going internationally now to other places. Is Uganda kind of your frame of reference for Africa or for a larger enterprise reaching out to other parts of the world? Or how does that work?
So I would say actually the Lord chose Uganda and dumped me into Uganda unbeknownst and opened my eyes. And it just is a community that is, it was just great soil for this to happen. And, you like to describe, a lot of us are gardeners, we're planting seeds. So when you came out there, you were part of planting those seeds. And it's just worked out that that's become both the first place that we've begun this process. It's a long-term process, right? It's going to take years. And our goal is really to help the local leaders become self-sustaining in apologetics so that there is a vibrant community of apologetics with ministries thriving in their local regions and really addressing the specific challenges that their churches face, but doing so with a good foundation of apologetics thinking.
One of the difficulties I think historically have with missions work is kind of the Westerner coming in with Western ideas and Western leadership, and then wanting to be the head of everything. And one of the things I really appreciate about what you're doing, Ben, and it's really the face, I think, of how missions have developed, at least in the last generation, from the earlier models, is that you're really working to train local people to do the work of ministry in that local environment. So those are people that are culturally near to the ones they're trying to reach, rather than you being an American trying to reach Ugandans and do apologetics with Ugandans. You're doing a discipleship enterprise. And I mean, you know me enough to know that my heartbeat is in discipleship and in training other people. And that's why I was so glad to be able to, my initial event was training pastors and being part of a training enterprise there in Kampala. And then going with you to that other university campus that was so far away.
Yes.
And I did want to say something about this because I think sometimes people have a little bit of a romantic view of missions, and we're going to Africa and help people in Uganda until they get there. And then they realize, wait a minute, this ain't like home. I mean, we went on roads like just in Kampala, in town, and I thought, this isn't a road. This is a riverbed, or this is a drainage ditch, or this is the road, and then traveling across country. Was it sugarcane trucks or whatever? There were all kinds of crazy vehicles that were on the road. It took us forever. I mean, it was a 10-hour drive, and there was nothing romantic about it. It's hard work. It's hot. You and I crossed the equator together, had a meal right there on the equator, and so I mean the safari was an added perk, okay?
Yes.
But that still was hot and dusty too.
That's right.
So this kind of work is a labor of love for somebody like you and anybody else who participates. But once I think people get that idea and they say, okay, I'm just going to surrender my comforts and I'm going to sacrifice myself on behalf of others. And I had to do this for 7 months when I lived in Thailand, working with Cambodian refugees there. Then just a whole new world begins to unfold. That was my experience when I was in Thailand, and I'm sure that this has been your experience too. So, tell me about how. And this is going to hopefully be instructive. You start out as an individual with an idea, and you said it kind of you stumbled on it by accident or something to that effect. Tell us, kind of from start to where you are now, how this developed. And partly what I'm thinking about is, I want people to see the potential that they have wherever they're at. To, after fashion, using language I know you're familiar with because I've used it so many times, is blooming where they're planted, and doing what they're capable of doing at the moment. So go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, so in some respects, I was blooming here in the Pacific Northwest. I was very active with Reasons to Believe. I was doing apologetics here. I was teaching courses. And for completely different reasons, I ended up going to Uganda with no thought in mind whatsoever about doing apologetics. But, at that very community, the Lord showed me the tremendous need, the tremendous opportunity, and enthusiasm for this part of what I really feel like the church needs to be doing a lot more of. And so I just kept coming back, and as the impact grew, it just became clear that this was an unmet need for these brothers and sisters who have little awareness, little access to apologetics. And so I wanted to be part of solving that problem. And by God's grace, I discovered a like-minded lady who happened to be a classmate of mine back in Biola, and she had done some work in Africa as well. So we started emailing, and before we knew it, we were going on mission there and doing some work. And another year passed, and it was like 2022. It was like, okay, it's time to turn this into a real ministry. And to be honest, you made the comment about kind of you have this romantic idea about, the glories of travel and, oh, we're going to go to exotic places. And part of that stuck with me, I confess. And when we first launched the ministry, we called it Adventurous Apologetics. And in retrospect, I realized that our focus with Adventurous Apologetics was giving fellow Western apologists like me the chance to go on adventure and experience kind of that romantic, wow, we're going off and, teaching the natives apologetics or whatever. But to be honest, Greg, that was very short-lived. Other people came into the ministry, started, talking about it, and we quickly realized that, no, this wasn't about us going, and serving ourselves by the adventure. It was about the people that we were encountering. We wanted to serve them. And so the obvious name was, well, what do? We take apologetics on mission. And so that became a much better name, much more descriptive of what we're doing. And, we've started in Uganda, but that has spread all over, East Africa, Southern Africa, Brazil. We've got a guy in Croatia. And the world beyond the West is just really alive and hungry and eager for apologetics, and it's a great time to be doing this.
Well, I'll confess also that when I went to Thailand, a big part of what I was thinking of at the time was the adventure of being in Southeast Asia under this, and I was 33 when I did that, and much younger and much more nimble and more flexible, etc. than maybe I am now. But that was part of the appeal to me. But and it was an adventure, and I know even what you're doing now is still an adventure. But it's not Club Med adventure.
No.
It's boots on the ground, feet in the dirt, hands dirty, roll up your sleeves, meet with people. It's hot, you're sweating.
Yes.
I remember that one event is at that school. Here,
Yep.
here we walk into this room. It's a whole concrete building. The windows are just square openings. They're old chairs sitting there. It's about 105 degrees, and a dear brother preaching in a suit with a vest,
Yes.
and just preaching his heart out, And then I had my turn. I mean, it was just like, whoa. But that's the way they live, and you enter into that, and you take the adventure in stride. But it's a lot of work.
Yes.
But it's one of the toughest jobs you'll ever love, as some
Yes.
people have described things. And I'm thrilled to see how you have taken the ball and run with it, from your very modest beginnings, and then seeing this need, and then returning to Africa, and through, blood, sweat, and tears kind of effort, building a foundation here that now is gaining momentum, and now being a multinational enterprise. It is kind of interesting to see. Maybe you have something to say about this. So you're starting there in Uganda, and all of a sudden, these. I don't know if it was part of your strategic plan. I never had a strategic plan for 31 years with Stand to Reason. These things just kind of happened as I sought to be faithful. But my suspicion is, in your case, a lot of this stuff just happened. Opportunities presented themselves in these other national environments as you were faithful serving in Uganda. So, can you fill in the blanks there for me a little bit? I don't want to presume on your circumstances, but...
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually do have a strategic plan, but that's like we've got our strategic plan, and then God has his plan. And so they don't always intermesh. But the framework remains the same, is our focus is really in regions where, like I say, there's little awareness, little accessibility, little training, and hardly any ministries doing apologetics. That's really where our sweet spot is. And so far, the Lord has just opened up doors, and it always starts with some kind of relationship. Somebody gets a hold of us, Facebook messages me and says, hey, I'm here in Brazil, and I heard about you from so-and-so, and I'm really interested in apologetics, and would love to partner with you in some way. So we just began, and thank the Lord for this technology now. I mean, having the ability to connect with people via Zoom, have those initial relationship building meetings, then being able to travel, and it's expensive, but possible to actually be there face to face. And then to be able to come back and have the work continue on. Most of our work is done online. So it's 24/7, 365. And so the Lord opens up the opportunities in one form or another. We were invited to Brazil through an amazing sequence of events. When we were last in Africa, we met a dear brother in Zimbabwe who runs a ministry called Africa Connected. And as his ministry name says, he's connected all over Southern Africa. So he brought leaders together from about 10 surrounding countries. And we just had a great time with them. I'll be seeing them here in another month, regathering. And then the opportunity in the Balkans, starting in Croatia, was again a God thing. There was a church that invited a Biola student that we know. He went, he knew about us, and said, hey, this is a great place for Apologetics on Mission. And so it's starting to thrive there. I think our biggest challenge, honestly, Greg, is we're so small and the need is so huge, and the opportunities, we have to say no a lot. I've got brothers and sisters who are connecting, inviting, and we're saying, yeah, someday, just not yet today. We don't have enough bodies, we don't have enough funds, not the right time. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, now, is kind of get the word out more, invite like-minded people to join in with us or partner with us in some way to collectively do this work of raising up Christian defenders globally.
I'm involved with another organization that's doing very similar stuff, but they've been around for a long time, and I'm trying to remember the acronym for their organization.
I can tell it to you. It's the Center for Apologetics Research.
Yeah,
So
there it is.
Yeah.
CARM. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to say. CARM, CARM.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
M stands for ministry or whatever. But I'm never real comfortable with my memory,
Yes.
and mentioning something like that, might be some weird. No, those guys are fabulous, but it's the same thing. The impression I get from the feedback I get from them, and that is, and I think you and I had dinner with one of their workers when we were in Uganda the last day I was
Absolutely.
there. Absolutely.
And this would be a good place if you don't mind me interjecting. So Paul Carden heads up.
Paul, yes,
Paul.
that's right.
And
Walter Martin, he's a Walter Martin
yes.
disciple, by the way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so this is how the Lord weaves lives together, because you introduced me to Paul, and I contacted Paul, and that has remained a very fruitful partnership. In fact, we're hoping Paul will go with us to Brazil when we go there in October. His team is spread out through Africa, and we work with them almost every time we go there. So yeah, it's not that it's a complete desert of apologetics in these regions. And more, even since we were there, ministries have been birthed. And so it's really a dynamic and exciting time.
One of the reasons I brought up CARM and Paul Carden is just because what I'm aware of through their work is how the incredible need, and how there's a lot of people that are deeply spiritually minded in these countries, but they are like sheep without a shepherd, or rather, they got the wrong kinds of shepherds that are leading them. They're poison. They're wolves in the flock. And so, what you're doing with Apologetics on Mission, with Carden is doing with CARM, and the others that are there is a massive field there. You're a bright light in a lot of darkness. So, how would people get in touch with you to talk to you about being useful to Apologetics on Mission in one way or another? What would you suggest?
So the easiest way is just to go to our website. It's apologeticsonmission.org. A little bit of a mouthful to type, but that's where you'll find everything that we're doing. You can get a hold of us through there. Just connect with us at the Connect thing. And what I really like to do is honestly meet people. And so if people have an interest and they want to hear more, I'm pretty accessible on Zoom, and so I'll hop on Zoom and just have a conversation and see if there's a next step in the future. And so many of our relationships have started that way.
I'm curious, and I didn't ask you this before, and so I don't know how you're going to answer, but is there a need that you have, or is this an opportunity for some, say, more, for lack of a better word, more budding young apologists to begin to, start to ply their trade in a very basic fashion with people who need that kind of thing?
Yes. So when we're a little bit bigger, we'd love to be able to take younger people with us on mission and give them an exposure to the need there. And if they've done some apologetics work, say, through what they've learned from you guys at Stand to Reason, or maybe they've been to Biola or Summit or whatever, Ratio Christi, being able to deploy that in the field in a place like Uganda or Zimbabwe that's a real adventure. So we do preserve the adventure part, but we also recognize that it's not super comfortable. I will mention that we do have a young lady on staff who is currently a Biola student, and she's just a rock star. And so she's in France right now, going through J.W. Montgomery's workshop. Can you believe he's still hosting those?
Yeah, he is. I saw him in the spring, 90, or maybe it was in the fall, but relatively recently, 92 years old, still going strong. He asked me, when are you going to come back to Strasbourg? I said, whenever you invite me. Okay. Because I've been there twice as a trainer. And he said, okay. He said, we got to make that happen. And I hope he does, because it's a great thing that's going on. That's great training for this young person on your staff, too. Man, I'm proud of what you're doing, Ben. It was kind of cool for me to be there kind of in the beginnings of the enterprise and make what contribution I was able to, but you certainly have taken the ball and run with it, and now you have the opportunity of not only discipling those in country, but your organization being a means by which others can begin to practice what they know and teach, and passing that information on to others. So you kind of have a discipleship wick burning at both ends, which is fabulous. I love that kind of thing. So the organization is called Apologetics on Mission. The website is apologeticsonmission.com. Ben Clifton. Oh, I'm sorry, .org. Okay. And thank you for that correction. And Ben, what a treat to talk to you again.
Great to catch up, Greg. And thank you again for the seeds that you were instrumental in planting, some of the seeds that have now borne fruit. So it's great to reconnect.
Well, that was a loaves and fishes thing. I feel I did a small thing that God multiplied under your hard work and under your faithful attention to what we did. Those few days that we spent together just on the equator in the center of the world. So thank you, Ben, and God's best to you.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
All right, let's go to break here, and I'll be back in just a few moments. So we're in the middle of August here, and of course that means we're in the middle of our Be One of the 100 campaign. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and it really is a cool thing for us at Stand to Reason. The most, I got to be careful how I say this. Let me put it this way. One of the most valuable groups of people on our support team, our partners, are our strategic partners, okay? Now, you guys know what we do. All of you who've been listening for a while, or even a short while, not a long while, know that there are times when people who are Christians feel confident about their convictions, and then there are times when they don't, because they get hammered from the outside, and they have questions they can't answer, and so they begin to question their own convictions, and that interferes with their ability to represent these convictions they have in a confident way to other people as well. And this is why STR is here. We train Christians. That's the first three words of our mission statement. We train Christians. What do we train them to do? We train them to think more carefully and then be able to defend classical Christianity and classical Christian values in the public square. And the public square is wherever you happen to be, where people need to hear the truth, okay? And so one of the ways that we're able to do that is, in general, we're a donor-supported organization. But we have an inside group of people that have committed themselves to give on a regular basis at some level they choose, and therefore are identified by us as our strategic partners. They are financial partners with us in a strategic way, and they are the foundation for our enterprise. And by the way, many of you have heard about strategic partners because you've heard people call in, and before they ask their question or engage me in conversation, they say, hey, by the way, I'm a strategic partner and happy to be so. And I want to encourage other people to be strategic partners. So that's my appeal right now. This is the month where we invite people, aggressively invite them to become strategic partners. We call it a Be One of the 100 campaign, because we are shooting for 100 new strategic partners in the month of August. And that's what we're after, all right? Now, if you would like to consider that, and by the way, if you have been a regular part of Stand to Reason, you listen to us on a regular basis, and you benefit from us, my policy from the very beginning of STR is we are never going to ask anything from anyone unless we've given to them first. So if we've been giving to you, I want to encourage you to become a partner and give back to us. Very straightforward. You give back to us, we can continue giving to you, and through your gifts and your support, we can give to so many others. You can go to str.org/partner. str.org/partner. Okay. If you have any questions about becoming a strategic partner, I invite you to contact Ocean Wilson. She's the Director of Donor Relations. Ocean as in like the big C, ocean at str.org. Ocean at str.org. And now she's done something bold here in my information sheet. She's actually included her phone number. So I guess it's okay to give that. And I will. If you'd like to talk with Ocean about being a financial partner with STR, 562-595-7333. That's 562-595-7333. And as an added incentive, if I'm going to send you 2 special gifts for signing up to be a strategic partner during this month, okay? I'm going to send you the entire 2022-23 reality conference. It's titled Seek and You Will Find, okay? It's via video on demand, okay? You're going to get that. And you're going to get the reality conference t-shirt, both of yours in warm thanks when you become a strategic partner in August, giving $25 or more each month. Once again, str.org/partner, or go send an email to Ocean Wilson or maybe I guess this is a message, that's her email address, ocean@str.org. I'm so smooth in these things, see? Just rattle it off. Ocean@str.org, or call her simply at 562-595-7333. Okay, there you go. And I hope you do call her, because she asked for that. If you call her, you want to talk with her about being an ambassador in the form of a strategic partner, which is great. All right, we're going to go to some open calls now. That is calls that you guys have left for us to talk about. You're not here. I am. I'm off schedule right now. So if you go to str.org, and that's our homepage, and go to podcasts, and under live podcasts, you can see an opportunity to leave a question verbally for me here, and Amy will collect it and put it in the queue, and eventually we'll get to it. All right. So the first question I want to deal with here is Kate's. Do you have that there, Kyle? Yeah, you have Kate's. Okay, Kate, what's on your mind?
Hi, Greg. My name is Kate. Love the podcast. Love your books. Thank you for all that you do. My question today is just, I'm looking for some advice, some practical wisdom on how to handle this specific situation. We have a children's museum in our small town, and recently I learned of a very disturbing event that's being held at this museum. The museum does frequently rent out its spaces to different private parties, and this one that I learned of is a queer prom. It is marketed for ages 12 to 18. It's held after their regular business hours, but this is a space that I take my very young children. I have a 4-month-old and a 2-year-old, and I take them there very often to play. And first of all, this event is disturbing as it is, especially since it's for ages 12 to 18, and they're going to have drag queens there with really inappropriate names. And what's even worse, I think, in my mind, is that they're choosing the venue for this particular event at a children's museum mainly for the use of young children. I mean, whenever I take my 2-year-old, there's, children that are usually under 10 years old playing in this museum. So anyway, it's not going to be taking place during their regular business hours, but still, I just wonder, what advice do you have for Christians to navigate these situations where the LGBTQ agenda and propaganda just continues to become, to get closer and closer and creep closer and closer to our very young, impressionable children. And I really just not sure how to proceed in this situation. Should I continue to give them business? Yeah, where do you draw the line? Any advice or thoughts you have on that would be appreciated. Thanks, Greg.
Well, Kate, this is not an unusual circumstance that you're describing. You did mention this is in our small town, which just indicates that this kind of penetration of cultural corrosion is not just happening in the big burgs, as it were, big cities where you'd kind of expect this kind of thing to take place, but it is penetrating into smaller towns all over the country. Now, in your circumstance, it sounds like this is different than some of these events that have been sponsored in the past by places like libraries. Okay, when I say sponsored, I mean that the library is operating during its regular hours and inviting these groups to come in and do like drag queen story hour or things like that. Now there you've got essentially a community government organization that is supported by taxpayers and is being used to aggressively promote, as you pointed out, a very controversial and divisive point of view about sexuality. Now, the question that's a fair one to ask is, what does any government agency have to do with doing any of this kind of thing? Now, that's the case where the libraries where the libraries, in a certain sense, sponsoring it as part of their regular hours and stuff. Yours is different because it's an after-hour event, and apparently, though that facility is available for private groups to do other after-hour events, and they're not actually promoting the thing; they are just making the facility available for those who want to promote their own enterprise. And in this case, they're queer prom. And so it's a little bit different kind of circumstance. Now, of course, it creates a cultural concern, and I'll respond to that in just a moment. But I just want to make this distinction. When the government agencies are promoting something like this, which they have in my view, absolutely no legitimate role in promoting, it is a cultural indoctrination about a narrow view of human sexuality. I say that this isn't the majority view. But what they're trying to do is use the government facility actively, not just hire it out to whoever wants to use it after hours. That's your situation. But when a government agency is actively using it to indoctrinate young people on a controversial and divisive point of view that is unrelated to good governance. They should not be doing this. And this is where it's appropriate for people to say no. And of course, this has been happening all around the country. Parents have stood up. They've gone to these events. They've gone to the leadership. They say no. So I think that's an appropriate action to take. You go to the leadership. You say, this is not your job. Okay? So that's one kind of event along these lines. The other kind is what you're facing, and this is a little different because, as I understand it, the museum itself is not sponsoring this. They are simply making this space available. And that's entirely different enterprise. So to go to the museum and say, well, look at what you guys are doing, you shouldn't be doing this, is a way of saying you shouldn't be renting out your facility to certain groups, but only to other groups. And now you're running into an issue of discrimination that is different than the government actually condoning or supporting or advancing this particular point of view. Here's my here's my impulse or my thoughts about this is there's not much you can do about the circumstance you just described. I know there's a sense in which you think if you come the day after this queer prom, you're thinking there were a lot of gross things happening or being taught or said the night before, but now you're there with your 4-month-old and your 2-year-old playing in the areas they always play in with no exposure to that information or that detail, as I understand it. And it might feel a little weird to you, but it's not going to affect your 4-month-old or your 2-year-old. In fact, even if that was going on in the background, they wouldn't have hardly any idea what's going on, certainly not the 4-month-old. But if it were going on in the background, I wouldn't take even young kids like that there. I'd go on a different day when these things weren't happening. You know, kids do pick up on certain things. Certainly a 2-year-old can pick up on some things and just be confused. We don't need to be exposing 2-year-olds to sexual material. This corrupts kids. We need to be protecting them. And I remember, and I've said this before, reading Corrie ten Boom's book, The Hiding Place, and she and her family protected Jews during the Second World War, and she ended up in a concentration camp, Ravensbrück, I think. She survived and wrote a book that gave great Christian testimony about what took place. But there's a piece there in the book that always stuck out to me, and she's giving an account of when she was a child. Her father was a clockmaker, and I don't know, once a week or whatever, he had to take one timepiece that he owned, take it into the city, into the capital city by train, and then match his time on his timepiece to the official clock there, so that he could set all of the clocks that he was responsible for taking care of in their town. Okay. Now, on one of these trips, though, she's reading in her Bible and she sees a phrase that, in her translation, Dutch, amounted to the phrase sex sin. Now, when she read sex sin, she didn't know what that meant. And so she asked her father, Papa, what does this sex sin mean? And he said to her, Corrie, could you get that suitcase down from the top shelf up there for me? And she said, Papa, I can't do that. It's too heavy for me. And he said, Corrie, you're right. That's too heavy for you. And this concept that you just asked about, sex sin, that is too heavy for you to carry also right now. So you need to trust your papa to carry it for you until you're strong enough to carry it yourself. Now, I love that anecdote because it demonstrates the proper wisdom of her father that distinguishes between the ideas that are appropriate for kids and ideas that are not appropriate for kids, but more appropriate for adults or emerging adults at least. And that whole sense of trying to protect young people from things that they are not emotionally and soulishly capable of handling and managing is a really great concept. But it is completely forgotten now because, not forgotten, it's even worse than that. It's disparaged. And now they want to indoctrinate kids at very young levels, children's museum levels, in these terrible ideas. So that's what's going on. This is the direction of the culture. And in some cases, there's not much you could do about it except for stay away. When governments are kind of enforcing this kind of thing, when governments are sponsoring this kind of thing, that's different. When it happens in schools and in libraries and government institutions that are sponsoring the event and promoting the indoctrination, and let's just call it what it is. That's what it is. Indoctrination. When they're doing it, that's an abuse of political power and certainly an abuse of taxpayers' money. Okay? Now, I wrote a piece that this might be helpful in that regard. in this category that we're talking about, and I realize we're talking about two different categories here. I wrote a piece for our local school district, and Amy, I don't know, maybe you can put this in the notes if you can find it, but I've referred to this before, and I wasn't quite sure how to locate it online. It's like a school board. Is that right? That's the key word, school board. And there was something in the curriculum that was being developed and that had to do with promoting these sexual kinds of things. And they were given the community an opportunity to express their point of view. Now, this was just a sop. This was just a gesture because they actually had no intention of any sort to change anything that they were doing of this nature. But at least they're giving the people an opportunity to say something. So they invited the community to come, and I was going to be out of town that time, but I actually wrote a piece that needed to be 3 minutes, no longer than 3 minutes, but people can come up to the microphone and give their point of view. So I wrote a piece for my wife to deliver, which she did. And I addressed this in, I think, a very appropriate way. It was firm but gracious. And what I was doing was I was using their ways of arguing. What do they care about? They care about tolerance. They care about equity. They care about community and all this other stuff. So I'm trading on that. And basically I said, the school is the place to advance values that everyone shares. The school is not the place to advance the values of a narrow group of people over and against the majority. Values that are divisive, values that are at least arguably corrosive, values that the community doesn't share. And we have a diverse community. We have Muslims, we have atheists, we have Christians, we have Hindus, we have people of all different ethnic and religious backgrounds, and we ought to respect that. And so we promote the values that we all agree on. We don't promote the values in our government institution that we don't all agree on. And the problem is, and this is all part of my presentation there, is that if you take your opportunity now to use your power to enforce and advance a narrow point of view to the exclusion of the others, in other words, a point of view that these people disagree on, many people do, most people do actually, then when the power structure changes, or not the structure, but who's in power at the moment, they can use your way of doing things to silence you now. And so now it's your ox going to be gored. Now, I spent a lot of time to wordsmith this piece, and I just gave you a brief overview, paraphrased. I didn't talk about oxes being gored, but it was the same point. And therefore, this isn't the way they ought to do things. Now, my wife very faithfully read it. She had people come up to her afterwards and thank her for what was said. Nothing changed anything, though, of course, and that was a given. Nevertheless, at least, in a sense, we, corporately, my wife and I, were able to make a statement. Now, this piece is available online. I think the key word there is school board, something like that. You can do a search on that. In the show notes, Amy will have a link to it probably. So just keep that in mind, that there is a way to address some of these things when the government is stepping out of line. And if you want to steal my words or whatever, you're welcome to do that, or use that as a form that you could follow if you want to give something written or publicly delivered in an environment like that. The circumstance that Kate, you're facing is, like I said, are a little different. This is a private enterprise hiring the facility, renting the facility for their private project, which is called the Queer Prom. And there's just not much you can do about that, except for stay away. Or you could pick it, too. I mean, if there are people who will do that kind of thing and say, this isn't appropriate for our community, even though it's done on a private level, this is not good, it's not right, it's not good for our kids, however you want to do it. But that's an extra step, and it's a little more aggressive, I think, than many people are going to feel comfortable doing. I personally would not would not pick it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just not my deal. I can write the piece that my wife will read, as I said, but I'm not going to go and demonstrate against this private thing. And it's very difficult when you demonstrate against those private things not to look just mean-spirited. You have to be very, very careful how you comport yourself, and if you have signs, what the signs say, because it's very easy for people to misconstrue your intentions and your approach and your words, and that would reflect very negatively on your view. So, but it's a personal shot there, a personal call, and do what you're able. And maybe that you just ignore it and you don't go, again, since it's a private event. That might be the best thing to do. Hope that helps, Kate. That's it for this show, friends. Greg Kokel here for Stand to Reason. Give them heaven, okay? Bye-bye now.